Velkommen og god dag alle sammen. Today we are taking a detailed, in-depth look at Seidr. So I released a video just a couple days ago of what I think Seidr is. So you can watch that if you want to. The link is in the description below, and I'm going to be releasing a lot more videos on this because there's so many things we can go into depth about, so many theories and so many different pieces of evidence to try and figure out exactly what it was and how to practice it if you want to do it in modern times. But the truth is, we don't know anything about it for certain, really. We don't know about the practice. We don't know, anything about it pretty much. It's all lost. And as usual, I'm seeing a lot of people talking about it, and it seems like they're just kind of pulling theories out of thin air. So I wanted to make this video just speaking about the things that we know 100% certain about Seidr. I will go into all the different theories and into all the different pieces of evidence in other videos, but I need to make this one first, and it's important we all know the things that are 100% sure before we go into any deeper theories and reconstructions of this. So this video here is just going to be purely academical and factual, because we have to start with the information that we do know before we can get into the information that we're just speculating on. So what are some things that we know about Seidr for sure from the actual sources? Well, let's look at the etymology first. Seidr is believed to come from the Proto-Germanic word sagas, which you can see up here, and it meant sign, soothsaying, so basically predictions, and a lot of other Proto-Indo-European languages have a similar word, Celtic, Lithuanian, and if you go back far enough, they believe it comes from the Proto-Indo-European word soito, which I'll put up here. And that's a string or a rope, and it's ultimately from the Proto-Indo-European root se, which is right here, which means to bind with a rope or something. Now this is interesting. It's used in some Old English places as a snare or a halter or some sort of binding like that. Hold that thought, because we're going to come back to it. That idea of Seidr being kind of a binding type of thing. So, hold that thought. I'm going to come back to that a bit later on today. So first, let's look at the evidence from the Eddas that we see. The prose and poetic Edda. We find a little bit about Seidr there, and one part of it speaks about how the magical powers that Odin knows how to do. And it says some different things like, of course, divination, as we know Seidr to be mostly, but also bringing dead men back to life, and just the fact of Odin having his ravens and Mimir's head that told him these secrets, and using the runes and some other things like this. That's just referred to as general magic, or Galdir, that Odin knows. But then right after this, we see Odin speaking about Seidr, and he tells us exactly what Seidr is, or what it does. So he says he knows that he can predict fate, of course, divination, and predict things that are yet to come. He could also cause people death or bad health. He could make someone stupid or weak and give their strength and brains to another person. And then he said he also knew Fjokingi, which seems to be some sort of process of gaining knowledge somehow. We don't know how. Also, in the prose Edda, we see that it is something very, very sexually shameful, or ergi is the word that they use. It basically means faggot, basically. It's one of the worst insults, and it was something that only certain priestesses or women goddesses would be taught in the old texts. But it was still considered shameful even if they did it. If a woman or a völva or even a goddess did Seidr, it was still considered pretty shameful. But if a man did Seidr, that was pretty much the most shameful thing and embarrassing thing you could possibly do. I think Jackson Crawford is my favorite translation of this. He translates ergi as sexual passivity, but a very, very mean word about that that we can compare it to. Also, it's pretty clear in multiple sources in the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda that Freya was the first one who learned Seidr, and she taught it to Odin and possibly some of the other Aesir. It's also pretty clear from the Eddas that the Vanir, which Freya was a part of, the Vanir, that group of gods, had less pride in a way, and they were somehow more shameful and didn't really care too much about the sexual game that may have come from practicing Seidr. Also, we see in the Eddas and in the Poetic Edda poem Lokasenna, which is basically just a poem of Loki talking shit, which I like. Loki shames Freya and tells her how she's kind of cursed for practicing Seidr. He also makes fun of Odin for practicing this, saying how shameful it is. We also see in the Eddas that the Völvas were the ones practicing Seidr usually, and they traveled around and they were paid for their work doing prophecies. So Odin himself paid the Völvas for a prophecy. So they were traveling women, and they performed the act of Seidr, and they were paid for that, or given some room and board basically by rich noble people that we see there. That's what we know for sure. So those are the Eddas, and as you know, the Eddas and gods and stories from this were just symbolic of different aspects of nature. So the Eddas were not things that actually were believed that happened. People didn't believe things actually happened in the Eddas. But follow my channel. I have a whole playlist there where I speak about this and what the Eddas actually mean. But let's look at the sagas, because at least in the sagas we know that these things actually probably happened. So first, let's look at the saga of Gisli Surson. That is a guy in here called Thorgrimr, and he was paid to do some Seidr to create some sort of magic. I forget what it was. It was probably some divination. I forget what the actual story said, but I'll look at that in other videos. But it had mention of a staff and a horse, and it was described as incredibly shameful. What was he doing with the staff and the horse? I don't know. It doesn't look too good, but that's what happened in the story. It doesn't tell us much more details. It also tells us how he made a kind of a platform to practice it on, and then this was the location for it. So building up a stage or a platform where people were typically like, if it was like a play, or if it was like the gallows or a scaffold in the middle of the town, that's some kind of stage, some kind of raised platform is where Seidr was typically performed. We see that in pretty much all the different sagas. So we'll look at another one, Rolf Kraki's saga, and also Erik the Red's saga. And here there were women practicing Seidr on a platform again. So we're pretty sure that Seidr was meant to be practiced on a stage out in the open in front of an audience like this. Also in Erik the Red saga, he gives a pretty detailed account of Seidr. It explained that the women came in the evening accompanied by the man that she was supposed to meet. What was she doing with that man? I don't know, but it doesn't sound too good. But it describes her outfit here. She wore a blue mantle with gems attached to it. She wore beads around her neck, a sheepskin hood on her neck, and some different animal skins as shoes and gloves and things like that. She carried a leather bag with different talismans, and she had her staff. We always see mention of a staff when we're talking about the Seidr. So this is very descriptive in Erik the Red saga, and it was probably a unique outfit or something like that. This woman was probably not dressed like this everywhere. Think about it. If you are writing about a soccer game now in the year 2020, you wouldn't write about all the details of the players' uniforms, of everything they wear, because everyone reading at this time would say, duh, of course they were wearing socks and shoes with cleats on it and a t-shirt with a number on it. So Erik the Red would not have written about this if it was just the standard. So for sure the outfit maybe would have been unique in Eric the Red saga, but the platform and the man who accompanied her seems to be written as an obvious thing, and we see this in other sagas too. Also, the use of a staff and something very shameful as well as that. Also in this saga, the Seidr woman, or Völva, asked if any of the women around here watching knew how to sing the song to bring the spirits forward. And one woman knew it, but she didn't want to sing it because she was a Christian. But she ended up singing it anyway, and then the Völva woman was happy, and the song was beautiful, and the spirits came. So we can also see there that there was some kind of song for sure that was believed to bring the spirits of the dead into the vicinity there. That's probably true of all different instances of Seidr. We also see about it in Saxo Grammaticus' book, Gesta Danorum, the history of the Danes. He also writes about Seidr and how it was practiced on a platform and with a staff, and how the women were feared almost. They were shamed. It was a shameful thing to do Seidr, but the women who practice it were feared and respected, absolutely. So that's just one point about that. Another saga is Vatnsdæla saga. It writes about the woman who also carried a staff, which she could make someone lose their memory if she tapped them on the cheek. I forget if it's the left cheek or the right cheek, but if she tapped them on the cheek 3 times, the person would lose their memory. Also in Vatnsdæla saga, Seidr seems to be a Sami art. In this story, a Sami woman got up on the podium or platform, and a bunch of men came up to her and took their turn and asked about their prophecy. What do they do before they asked about their prophecy? I don't know, but it doesn't sound too good. Who knows? But yeah, in this book, in this saga, Vatnsdæla saga, it specifically says that it was believed to be a Sami art that the Norse learned from the Sami people. So maybe that's true. I don't know, but it's an important point. That's about it for the sagas. There are quite a bit more mentions of Seidr and things we can learn from it, but I'll go into all those in depth in another video. But that's about that's the main points of things that we know for sure. So let's look at a couple of the archaeological finds. That tells us a little bit too. The Skjern runestone, I'll put that up here. And that has a mention of Seidr. It was in Denmark, still there, I think, and the stone seems to be raised by a woman in memory of her husband or something like that. But the last piece of the inscription, she basically says, anyone who comes and disturbs this stone or resting place, you are a Seid. So it's like an insult or something, like you practice Seidr, like compare this to when a 60-year-old says, haha, you can't pee in that toilet or else you're gay. So this woman who raised this runestone basically casts shame upon anyone in the future who might try and disturb the runestone and the resting place of her loved one. Kind of like a no trespassing sign, of putting a little curse on that. But I'll go into this one in depth in another video as well. Also, maybe one of the most famous ones is the Oseberg ship, which is the most important archaeological site in Norway from the Viking Age, I think, and actually right outside of my town there, Larvik, and the ship is in it's between Sandefjord and Tønsberg, I think. I've been there many times. 2 women were found here buried with animals and some other things, and most scholars believe that these were Seidr workers because they were buried with all the things that Seidr practitioners were believed to have had. But these women were definitely highly valued, not shamed. They were maybe shamed, but they were, these 2 women, these Völva or Seidr women, they got the biggest and most luxurious burial in all of Norway ever. So you can look at that archaeological find there. That's a beautiful place, and you can see a lot of information from that, but they were believed to be Seidr women. So even though Seidr women or people practicing Seidr were shamed, and it was a very shameful act, they could still be feared, respected, and even loved because, you know, these women got the biggest, most luxurious burial in all of Norway, pretty much. So they were definitely valued. To me, I kind of connect Seidr as a parallel to the Greek Sibyls, you know, from the movie 300, where that crazy redheaded chick is dancing around all crazy and stuff like that, and gives the prophecy. I connected to that. I think if you go far back enough in time, when we were all one people in the north and in Greece, this was probably a similar tradition, similar act there. But I don't know too much about the Greek Sibyls. I'll do a little research on that and go into that in another video and do some comparisons about that and Seidr. But that's a quick little note that this is probably a big Indo-European tradition and goes back much further than the Viking Age. In some form like that. So that's about it for this video. We can take a few things from the sources that have gone over that we know for sure 100% about Seidr. No theories needed. So first thing we know for sure is Seidr was used for divination mostly, but it can definitely have more active aspects of magic as well. The first one. 2, it was always performed with a staff. Also, it was always performed on some raised platform of some kind. 4, it got the practitioner in a trance-like state. It got them they weren't quite there. Maybe their brain or their spirit left their body for a little bit there. And there was definitely singing involved, and definitely, sounds like in some of the rituals there could be dance involved as well. 6, it was very shameful for women to practice Seidr, but very shameful, probably the most shameful thing that a man could do, actually, from what the sources say. But number 7, most important piece of evidence that the people practicing Seidr were very high valued, even though it was a very shameful act. The people practicing it were very valued, and they were very important people, and they were feared and respected. So that's just a little extra note there. So those are 7 things that we know for sure 100% about Seidr, and there are a lot more things that we can kind of, start to get good theories about what it is as well. And I'll go into all that in other videos. Those will come soon, but if you want to look at what I think Seidr is, what I personally believe, that video is in the description below, and it has something to do with the act we all know of witches riding a broom. I think that's just watch the video. That's in the link in the description below. That's about it for today. We'll go into more detail in the videos to come. See ya.